everybody, this is Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to start a new conversation. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet because I've got three different ones in mind, and one has appeared while we were waiting for everyone to arrive for the call. So right now we're talking about addiction and where it might overlay on the ChangeGrid, and we were talking briefly about how it's really about dopamine. Dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters that's been very tightly connected to addiction because, as Brian Sykes often says, dopamine wants more dopamine. And so as we thought about this and where that might be at its strongest point, that took us to the back side of the ChangeGrid. So here we are looking at the dark side of the adjective map. This is where those four red powerless points would come into union. So the purple is the power point and the red ones are the powerless points. And so there aren't four powerless points, there's just one. But it all comes together from four different directions. And so continuing what Jane, you've been saying, it sounds to me that if I am in the upgrid danger zone, I may very much use something to escape these feelings. And if I'm in the in-grid danger zone, because up there I'm in a really life-threatening situation, on the in-grid side of things, I might turn to some sort of a drug or whatever to escape these feelings of being cowardly and mousy and shy and whatever, spineless, oppressed in the worst case scenario. I may turn to that to escape these feelings or to perhaps give me what I feel like I'm lacking. Nevertheless, it's still escaping these labels. Downgrid, where I'm in the deepest parts of apathy, where I've got feelings of being depressed, dull, moody, negative. I may very well turn to a drug to escape from these feelings. But when I look at the outgrid danger zone, I think the person who's turning to whatever their substance of choice may be is not really looking to escape these feelings as much as they're looking to magnify these feelings. So everybody touch your forehead and go, how interesting is that? You know? So what's that all about? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, this is Jane. That's what I was saying, is that it could have to do with the drug of choice in those different quadrants. And if you were thinking about like gambling and the chance to win, or a grifting, you know, or cocaine, those kinds of things that, and you were saying top drawer alcohol, you know, maybe, but those can really magnify your sense of self, you know, and exacerbate those negative adjectives there on the outgrid side of the ChangeGrid. Whereas more on the left or the in-grid side, in-grid and maybe some upgrid in-grid, are you would want something that is soothing, is going to take your mind away, is going to transport you into la la land, and that would probably be more of the downers, the you know, heroin, down.
But what about opioids? Probably to get out of pain.
Opioids.
Yeah, well,
any of the opioids like heroin or the fentanyl or something like that.
Right, definitely to escape. Now, just to kind of pull this back to dopamine and what Chris's original question was, it would seem to me that if I'm on the outgrid side of things, pardon me scooting things around, but if I'm on the outgrid side of things in this danger zone, and the reason why I'm turning to whatever those substances are is to fortify this feeling, then as that substance wears off, these feelings begin to wear off. And I don't like that, so I go back to it. So I can understand that even though I'm not trying to escape from something and that's what's making me, no, maybe it's the exact same dynamic. What I'm trying to escape from are these things being reduced. So I want more of these things, where in the other three possibilities, I don't want these things, so I'm trying to escape from them. I'm finding this rather intriguing. So other thoughts on this little dynamic? I'm going to throw another thing into the mix in just a second, but thoughts about this?
I think that's interesting, T, about how you mentioned it's to fortify a position. I didn't even see that. I didn't see that coming. That's really interesting.
Yeah, well, why don't we go ahead, and I know we've talked about this on other calls, but apparently this one is about to become labeled for addiction and dopamine or whatever, attention management for addiction. But long ago, we did kind of a go around the change grid, and we talked about the differences between the 4 danger zones and what kinds of behaviors they might turn to in the name of addiction, etc. So let me just bring up a different diagram. So I suppose I should reduce it a little bit so you can see it. So this is just looking at the corners chopped off for the danger zones. And so if we think about, or, you know, another way to look at it, don't mind me, we can look at this, the driven driver, the expressive, the amiable, the analytical, looking at it energetically instead of just the danger zones. Let's see what we can figure out here. So we said that for each one of these areas on the change grid, there are certain drugs of choice, alcohols of choice, behaviors of choice that people who are in that area are more likely to turn to. And this came from some research that was done with the change grid. Oh my goodness, this is going to go back almost 25, 30 years ago, where we had a ChangeWorks professional who was actually earning his PhD in substance abuse counseling. And so he thought this would be interesting to just kind of go like, where does this all map? How does this all come together? His name is Wayne Laviolette. So anywho, I'll share with you some of the things that he came up with, but I'll do it as kind of like a fun little interactive quiz. And so let's start with a driven driver, because I do think they're the interesting one in the room. So a driven driver, think about all the characteristics of a driven driver. So first of all, they're driven. And so tell me some of the emotions you think they might be experiencing in the name of this drive.
Urgency,
competitive.
Excitement.
There could be some excitement, some competitiveness.
bravado.
Bravado. Yeah, we could go to the dark side of the change grid and find a few there, but confidence to the extreme. So it becomes arrogant, whatever it is. If I said that if this was a personality type, they may very easily view themselves as being superior to all others. Okay, so you be that person, you go to a bar, you tell me what kind of alcohol you want to drink. What's going to match you?
The most expensive.
The most expensive. That's why I said top shelf alcohols. They want something that others can't afford or others don't understand, or is, would never be something that they might have. So there's this whole kind of air. Now they might think it tastes terrible. That's not the reason for drinking it. They're drinking it for whatever reason, but that's what it's all about for them. What's the top shelf stuff? If you were to go into any kind of like a social club, a disco sort of thing where they do bottle service, I promise you, it's the driven drivers that are paying the bill for all those bottles of top shelf stuff. So that's it. So now, if I go up grid, and now we have this expressive, what sorts of alcohols do you think they like to turn to? Expressive. What's the expressive most interested in? They're interested in feeling something. I know we want to say having fun, but that's just one of the things. The expressive energy wants to feel something, wants to share those feelings. They want to experience things, share those experiences. So they're out there living life, living la loca, la vida loca. Yeah.
Okay, man or woman?
Either way, you go right ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Well, I'm thinking of, for women, I'm thinking of mimosas.
Okay. Party drinks.
Party drinks.
Party drinks. Yeah. And if it's got an umbrella in it, even better.
Even better, or a Mai Tai, or,
yep.
Yep.
Yep, they want the party drinks. And the guys, oh, they're the Long Island iced teas. You know, they're the ones that are going for the goal of drinking when you're an expressive is to let go and to release those inhibitions and whatever the case may be. You know, they don't go into it to get drunk per se as much as they go into it to have a good time. And
I think they'd be doing shots. They'd be doing
yeah,
shots because they would want everybody doing it with them.
Right, Jello shots off of people's belly buttons. I mean, they'll do all kinds of anything in the name of having a crazy time. And so, yeah.
It's the root of it that it's just that they want the attention. Is that the root of
They
all
want
of
the
it?
attention. They want to be around others and to enjoy it. That's the whole thing. The expressive wants to feel. And that's what that energy is all about. Now, sometimes what the expressive feels is very negative. That's because our greatest fears also fall into this category. But this is about living life, experiencing life, feeling whatever there is to feel. So sometimes that's really, really good, and you want more of it. And sometimes it's not so good, and you don't want more of it. When we start talking about addictive behaviors, you'll see another layer of information kind of added to this. But right now, alcohol's party time. That's what that's all about, party time. Now, we go over here to the amiable. The amiable energy wants what? What does the amiable energy want?
To kind of recede into the background.
Right. They want to be someone who is present, but doesn't draw a lot of attention to themselves. They want to be warm and supportive. Just think of the word amiable. They want to be friendly. They want to be supportive. They want to be all those good kinds of things. They don't want to do anything to rock the boat or anything like that. So when it comes to alcohol, what sorts of things do you think they might turn to?
Wine.
Wine. What else? Yeah.
What about those new seltzer drinks?
They may very well do that, although I think we're dipping our toe up into expressive for a second, but that could very well be the expressive amiable's choice.
What
Sure.
about virgin drinks without
Well, yeah, that may very well be that, because you're getting close to the kind of like the key concept behind their choice is that it must be socially acceptable. So it has to be proper. You know, they might have the little mixed cocktail, but only after 5 o'clock. They might have just the one glass of wine so whatever it is they're doing, it is driven by that socially acceptable sort of way of behaving. When they become addicted, that glass becomes a bottle. But it was just wine. So you get the idea? All right, how about the person downgrid? Analytical, the deep apathy, the very, very low energy. What do you think their choice might be? Okay. Cheap. Cheap beer.
Yeah. Whatever on special.
Yeah, whatever's on special, cheap beer, because they're not going for taste, they're not going for experience, they're going for a result. So whatever that is. But so we tend to plop those sorts of things downgrid. So again, you can kind of see that someone's choice of even something like alcohol is revealing more information to us than simply that they have a preference for something. So now let's take it to the category of drugs. So, what kind of drugs do you think the outgrid danger zone is likely to find? Is likely to seek out?
Cocaine.
Cocaine was probably the #1 back in the day when this research was being done. That was you talk about those Wall Street hard hitters, the highly competitive things, and cocaine seemed to be what they would turn to.
Other seed types
Yeah.
of seed.
Yep. And it all depends on what level of experimentation they were willing to have, like where they come into play. So LSD was probably more of a driven expressive, or someone who thought it was just going to be about whatever that expressive experience might include, but this is it. So anything that fortifies feelings of strength, so gives you any kind of like those superior things. Now I know very little about drugs and next to nothing about them personally, but I would imagine that today there are things that people who are driven drivers might go, this is even better than cocaine. But I don't know. I certainly don't know what that would be, but I imagine with technology being the way it is, someone's probably created something. Okay, Edie, you just moved up. Did you have something you want to throw in?
Oh, I didn't think, no, I'm here.
Okay, all right. Okay, you feel free. All right, so yeah. Okay, so anything that fortifies those feelings of greatness. Now, you move up grid. What kinds of drugs do you think these party people want to turn to? The expressives, the expressives. What do they turn?
Marijuana?
Actually, no. No, I mean, they might if it's handy. I mean, I think they'll do anything that's handy. But what do you think? You know, get into a club setting. Where are these people at? The expressives are at parties. They're doing things. So this
Are
is
they
where
doing hallucinogenics?
they could be doing some hallucinogenics, although I think that's also a little bit on the driver's side. So a driven expressive driver may very well find themselves with hallucinogenics. Or unless they think they're learning something, in which case they could be the analytical drivers. Because when I think of like Timothy Leary, at least the way he was packaging his drug exploration, it was because he thought there was something to learn from doing it. That there was a level of awareness that was being created, or a depth of understanding that was coming to there, as opposed to hallucinating for the joy of hallucinating. Okay, the expressive energy turns more to designer drugs, party drugs. And so they're the ones that will try, and again, I have no personal experience, but what was the one that all the clubs were doing back where there were clubs when people would actually go out and party? Was it ecstasy?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ecstasy, Molly.
Yeah, yeah. So the kinds of things that would like make a party more of a party. That's the kind of thing they would turn to. Now you go to the amiable side of things, and now things are going to get very interesting. Amiables will also have their share of drug addictions. What kind of drugs do you think an amiable gets connected to?
They're probably marijuana.
Nope, marijuana's, it's going to be downgrid. Marijuana's downgrid, but because again, we go back to this idea about what is socially acceptable. So if you are someone who is governed by this value that says whatever I'm doing can't be illegal, it's got to be something that's socially acceptable.
Alcohol.
Nevertheless,
Wine?
well,
Is it wine? Wine?
what was that?
Wine?
No, well, that's alcohols. I'm talking about drugs.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Quaaludes.
marijuana is socially acceptable in Washington.
Well, there you go. And so things have changed, but I'm going back in the day. These were remember back in the day when particularly I think it was marketed towards housewives, but they wanted tranquilizers.
Yeah, barbiturates,
Yeah, anything that
sleeping pills.
if they could go to the doctor and get a prescription for Valium, they would go to the doctor, get a prescription, and they would never label what they are going through as they get that refilled over and over and over again as being an addiction, because the doctor gave it to them. Now, someone mentioned opiates earlier on. Now, I would say to you that there's a lot of opiates that people get on the street as their first exposure. That's a very different category. But the opiates that are actually being prescribed to people who wasn't willingly trying to escape, they were trying to escape the pain they were in. But unfortunately, the OxyContin or whatever became very addictive very addictive to them, and that all happened. So how many of you recognize that? I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of people who become addicted to opiates didn't do so, and I don't know, they did it intentionally, but they thought they were doing what the doctor told them was okay to do. And so it ended up getting out of control. And yeah, then they became a full-blown addict and started doing all sorts of things in order to get more. But So I think that an amiable energy doesn't want to experiment. They're not doing the expressive stuff. They're not doing the driver stuff. And if anything, when they turn to weed, they're going to become the gigglers. But it's got to be socially acceptable. And the best way to get drugs socially acceptable is to get them legitimately from a doctor. And so now that leaves us downgrid, and the drug of choice downgrid is marijuana. Now, why marijuana downgrid? Because what does marijuana do?
Makes
Okay.
you hungry
Relaxes
and
you.
giggle.
It relaxes you. It also makes you hungry. It also makes you very profound. This is an interesting thing that the research was kind of showing specifically about marijuana, that people, once their high hits, can go through a series of very predictable phases of that buzz. And so, like the first one, depending on what strain of marijuana they were using, they might get very giggly, they might get very silly, they might get all of that, and then that might then lead to them becoming very animated and crazy, very active, and having conversations, all that sort of stuff. And then that would lead to hungry. And so they got the munchies, and then that would lead to sleepy. And then there's other varieties that you would take you from being mellow to being, at least you think, deeply profound. Okay, that then leads you to hungry, that then leads you to sleepy. And then there's another one, that strains that would make you first feel very mellow in a sensual sort of way, that leads you then to being very horny, that leads you then to being very hungry, and leads you to being sleepy. So it depends on the strain, but marijuana seems to be the drug of choice for people that are downgrid. And certainly as it's becoming more readily available and legally available, people are starting to also recognize that not all marijuana is the same substance. And while the active ingredient may be the same, the strains have very different effects on it. In fact, I remember, I'll share a personal story. It's the only drug I know anything about personally. But I was in Amsterdam, and when in Amsterdam, you're going to do what you do in Amsterdam. And so I went into a coffee shop. And you guys know that they don't sell, I guess you can get coffee at a coffee shop, but that's not its primary business. Well, I went into one, and their menu up on the wall of all the different strains of marijuana they had available were based entirely on what effect you wanted. And so they said, if you want to have a rip-roaring, laughing good time, try this one. And they said things like, if your heart has been broken and you want to wallow in self-pity, try this one. It was hysterical. It was actually like a menu based on what effect you wanted to walk away with. And so,
well,
yes.
if you're ever in Washington, you should go into a cannabis store, because at least the ones that I've been in, they have it's an overwhelming array of different products
Yes.
in every kind of way that you can consume it, as from edibles to
oils,
smokables to oils. And you can say, okay, I want to feel XYZ, and they'll say, well, here you can do this and this and this. And
it's amazing. There's tremendous science behind the cultivation of marijuana. So there you go.
It's quite an experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a few dispensaries in Arizona. There's medical marijuana is available, and you would walk in, and you kind of first you feel like you're doing something that's really quite illegal. You should be very careful, and then you realize no, everyone's there because they have a prescription for medical marijuana, and the whole feel of the place is that you're in a place of restoring health and controlling pain, and there's microscopes all over the place, so they can educate you about blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's really intriguing in many ways. And I say that just to demonstrate it appeals to the analytical energy. So I think
Oh,
people who want opiates don't really study opiates and go, well, this one could do this and this one could do this. That's a very different addiction, where the analytical is still someone who wants to know something, understand something, and so I think that it appeals to them because there is a very large body of knowledge that came from, if you think about it, I'm going to say it, grassroots movements. So,
Oh,
you know,
gee.
yeah, exactly. All right, now one more time around it, let's talk about what kinds of behaviors might they become addicted to. Because usually when we think of addiction, we think about substance addiction, specifically drugs and alcohol. But far more people are addicted to processes than are addicted to substances. And a process addiction can actually be any normal, desirable, otherwise beneficial behavior taken to an extreme. And so if we work our way around it, we can find that there's a whole set of addictions possible in the category of behaviors. So going to the out-grid danger zone, the driven driver energy, what kinds of things might they get addicted to behaviorally?
exercise, work,
Exercise, absolutely. Work, absolutely.
maybe eating disorders.
I don't know about that because that one definitely occurs downgrid too. So
There,
maybe,
there could be hobbies of certain kinds, like,
yeah, and that's why I was going, like, when it comes to eating as a hobby, like going out for the crazy kind of meal, having the culinary experiences, I
Mm.
could see where that might be it, because again, it's also resonating with their desire to appear to be above the average. And so let's spend more money on food for no particular reason. And, let's spend $500 on a tasting experience and stop by McDonald's on the way home. So I think that could be part of it.
Skydiving,
Oh yeah, thrill
extreme
sports.
sports,
Yeah, now
extreme sports.
you'll also find those very far up grid
Mhm.
when expressives are thrill seekers.
Yeah.
Driven drivers, perhaps as well. I can see them wanting to drive the high-speed sports cars, or they might even own them, purely because of how much noise they make and how fast they can go, even though there's no place they can legitimately drive it that quickly, at least not in this country. And so I think that they're addicted to gambling. They're addicted to sexual conquests. They're the ones, they want the conquest. Um, so what other sorts of things? They could get addicted to the stock market, which I guess is its own form of casino. Um, so you get the idea. It's got to be something that others wouldn't do, couldn't afford, whatever the case may be. Something that lets them know that the rules of a society do not apply to them. And so they will take all kinds in fact, when it comes to criminal behavior, the kinds of crimes that they're going to commit are going to be high risk, but high risk, high reward sorts of things if they're going to get involved. So anyone who's created a Ponzi scheme, well, they need a little bit of an analytical element to that for sure. But nevertheless, that's that driver energy, believing they can get away with it. Okay, so get the idea as far as addictions, addictive behaviors for the out-grid energy? Yeah.
Mhm.
Now the expressive energy, we talked about that a little bit. They are thrill seekers. So they're the ones that are out on the jet ski. If I said, which personality type buys a jet ski? I promise you, it's not an analytical. So analyticals borrow somebody else's jet ski. I've always said that the only thing better than having a boat is having a friend with a boat. So, all right, so the expressive gets addicted to those kinds of experiences that give them a bit of that rush of adrenaline. We might be now in between the expressive and the driver energy. So these are the ones that are out there, I don't know, bungee jumping and going paragliding, parasailing. These are the ones that will do that. But then you got those people, and I'm going to ask you where you think they are. These are the people that will do free climbing on rock surfaces.
They're analytical.
Yeah, because they have no belts. They've got no protection, so they're still seeking a thrill. Is that a driver energy being
I
put to
don't.
the test, or is that a very calculated
I think it's driven analytical because it's really, you have to really think through the roots, and there's a lot of planning and preparation and problem solving
Yep,
in the
yep, yep.
moment.
And again, if we look at the dopamine spread, you can see that along these edges, there's also high levels of dopamine, not the extreme level we would find at the powerless point, but you know, even if we want to say that behavior is addictive, they're not out doing it all day, every day. It's probably not interfering with their work. So when I think about things that people that like to go surfing every day, or people who get addicted to golf, where are they? Okay, I think they're where Jane is describing. There is a very big analytical energy when a game is in play, or where you have to like read the wave if you're, you know, surfing or whatever. So there's still that thrill there, but these people are not, I don't know how golf could become deadly, but you know, they're not doing that extreme sort of a thing. Maybe some of the surfers do.
I think I think anything can become
Mm-hmm.
not, I don't know if I would say deadly, but if you allow it to interfere with a normal, healthy relationships, work, you know, all of those things.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Then it becomes it can become detrimental to your
Yeah. Yeah,
life.
in fact, we have our grandnephew is in the junior PGA. The kid's really gifted when it comes to golf. And we kind of joked and just said, if he's going to turn that into, from a hobby into a passion, the only way that he can golf every single day is if he can turn it into a profession. So be good enough at it that you can make some money off of it. Otherwise, this could be a really big distraction. Okay,
You know,
so
Pete, we're talking about this as if it's fairly unitary, but there are people, I have known people who are very analytical, and yet they have a whole nother side of themselves that they indulge, right? And when you get to know them, you say, I never would have thought this person, I never thought this analytical would be a skydiver.
All right. And yeah, I like that you're
Yeah.
bringing that up, because now we are moving on to the back side of the change grid into this, you know, what's happening when these 4 danger zone actually become neighbors. Well, then you could have the person who's very analytical who decides to go and do something to revitalize, to reinvigorate themselves, because maybe they recognize that in so much of their life, they're so far downgrid into that analytical kind of mode that one of the ways their mind has come up with, I want to say to self-medicate, but to balance that, is to say, now go do something a little crazy. Find something vibrant, find something alive. And so I can certainly see how that dynamic would hold true. But I would ask you, are they using it as their own upgrid maneuver?
They could be. And the other thing is they might approach it differently than someone like us who would just go out on, you know, the Outer Banks, and they have school for this, and you get this, you know, sort of rickety apparatus, and you go running on the sand dune and off you go. They would probably go through and look at what the different schools were, what kind of equipment they used.
Yep. Or like the people that are doing the skydiving, where they make the formations. So it's like a team sort of a sport sort of a thing. I can see where that has to have an extremely high level of analytical energy contributing to it, at least the planning side of things. So yeah, so but I think that's it when we're going like, hey, but this person is usually whatever. Well, what's their sport? What do they do? I would say it's probably something that's balanced. So for example, I went to a science college. So Hope College is all about sciences. So the number one set of degrees someone will leave with will definitely be in the sciences. The second most popular one is music. And so for whatever reasons, people who are very connected to science will end up minoring in music. And that was my case. So, or they'll go into languages, something that's a little bit more on the expressive side of things, because the sciences are so analytical. There needs to be some sort of a way out. That being said, music is highly analytical. Most art forms can be looked at from a very analytical perspective.
Well, I'm going to throw a little monkey wrench in here.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not all personality determined. A lot of it is aptitude determined. And so some of these people have aptitudes that not only serve analytical purposes, but if you have high auditory memory, high pitch discrimination, and high rhythm memory, that's going to operate as a driver to become involved in that. So some of these really high ability people have these aptitudes, and they sort of press for expression. Totally from an aptitude perspective.
Right. That's a great observation. Even if we take it away from the danger zones and just look at the ChangeGrid in general, if I said to you guys, where does creativity live on the ChangeGrid? And so most people, in fact, I'll ask you, where does creativity live on the ChangeGrid?
What kind of creativity?
That's the question. Is it creative problem solving, or is it purely artistic creativity? What is this creativity you're talking about? It can live in different places. So where do you think, if I said creative problem solving, is that more upgrade or downgrade?
Downgrade, I would say.
Let's think about that.
It's important images of laughing.
Yeah. Okay. Creative problem solving means that something has to be present. And that is the problem.
Right.
And so the problem is upgrade. So creative problem solving is a downgrade maneuver. If you think about what do you actually do during creative problem solving, normalize, simplify, restore resources, add resources, that's probably elements of whatever that process of creative problem solving might end up being. So I think it's in the northern part of power, where when I think of someone who is just doing pure artistic expression, pure creative flow, just doing it, to me, that's more of a relaxed downgrade sort of an experience. But architecture is also a creative pursuit. How many of you want to have or live inside of a house that someone has created the same way of just grab a paintbrush and dip it in the paint and touch the thing and see what you come up with? It's like, no, there's a high need for you to understand the science behind that art form in order for you to be able to do it, in a proper kind of a way. Okay, so where am I at? Who am I? I'm over here. So we're talking again about these kinds of energies and what kinds of activities they would get addicted to. You know how I said the driven driver is all about sexual conquests? Well, who do you think the driven driver is likely to have a sexual conquest with?
Another driven driver.
Yeah, that could be, but any of these along this side. So that expressive, see, the expressive is attracted to the power that the driver energy is displaying. And so that's why when you're watching people at the craps table, it's the stereotypical thing is you've got the high roller there, and next to them are, the most beautiful women that are in the casino and all that. So you kind of get this idea that they share this desire for a thrill. One is motivating it, one is motivated by it, and you could see the same thing is going to occur. There's kind of a nice match between the driver energy and the analytical energy in terms of their behaviors as well. But the amiable, what kinds of behaviors does an amiable get more addicted to? Hello?
Love addiction.
Yeah, they get addicted to this idea about caring about others, caring for others.
Codependent relationships, I would think.
Yeah. Yep. And process-wise, they can get addicted to volunteering, where they spread themselves too thin. I mean, they're doing good work. I don't want to, judge the result, but if they do it all day, every day, at the exclusion of other things that are happening in life, well, that can become its own kind of a form of an addiction. An amiable might also be the gardener, the baker, the things that on the surface don't seem to be all that complicated, so very high level of ability isn't necessary, and they would probably minimize any praise they receive about the level of command they have over gardening or over baking or over whatever the behavior might actually end up being. So
isn't there a case? Isn't there a case also that the amiable could be attracted to that driven driver, because you see a lot of high-powered relationships where there are homemakers, but then you have the person that's way out forward, you know,
well,
that high-profile coach or whatever.
You're absolutely right. And if we look at the dark side of the change grid, we can even, I'm going to say it can become more sinister, but what it can become is a stronger foundation for the plot of any drama you watch on TV. So while it may be true that the out-grid danger zone person is always in the pursuit of those affairs, and the expressive energy is more than happy to have that affair, the out-grid person is probably married to an in-grid person. And they may very well be exploiting that individual. They're leaning heavily on that individual to take care of the activities of daily living, you know, raise those kids, take care of that household, all of those stereotypical, hopefully nowadays increasingly nonsensical sorts of roles. But nevertheless, this out-grid energy needs that in-grid balance. Just for practical matters to actually work. Behind every great leader is a great supporter. We'll just put it that way, instead of getting all gender specific around the whole thing. And similarly, I think that someone who is living in a downgrid danger zone needs that upgrid complement in order to bring them into balance. So how many people that are kind of like more downgrid by nature, slower to do things, more relaxed. And by the way, as far as addictive processes, people that are in the downgrade danger zone become addicted to things like video games, become addicted to things like social media, or by the way, social media, not as someone who's a blogger who's trying to turn into a job or get fame and fortune. That's what the upgrade person is all about. This person is more about trolling everyone else's websites and having opinions about things that, you know, so they're the ones that tend to stir up a lot of commentary.
What about in social media? What about influencers? I would think they're in the expressive, because
Sure.
all they care about is likes and
That's right. Well, and they might also be a little bit out-grid if they've monetized it very well, because now it's their job. They're trying to like lead the sort of way to do that sort of a thing. We're finding more and more, I'm sure you guys are noticing this as well, more and more pieces of software are becoming available for people to be building and sustaining online businesses. And so no matter what it is you're looking for, you're going to find that someone is in this out-grid zone, not necessarily the danger zone, but definitely strongly out-grid, that are trying to drive the social media instead of leverage the social media. So the social media that you talk about, influencers, those are the ones who are going like, I don't want to create any new social media, but I want to leverage that to make myself rich and famous. And the people that are more out-grid are saying like, oh no, I want to create the whatever it is. So, you know, who's going to create the next Instagram? Who created the TikTok? That was an out-grid person who said, no, I'm more interested in the business side of things than the flip side of it. Okay, the upgrid people, by the way, when it comes to social media, rely heavily on in-grid people to become their followers and their subscribers. And the downgrade people, again, they love analytical sorts of things. I don't mind sharing with you, by nature, I'm more of an analytical type. I'm more of a downgrade sort of a person. I know the social media influencers I follow, and usually it's because they're doing something that I find absolutely intriguing. They're taking it to a depth I didn't even know you could even take that something to, in the names of understanding something. There's a great website, and I think it's called Useless Inventions. But this guy has created a massive following by creating astounding inventions that have no value whatsoever. Nevertheless, they're very clever and they're very, interesting to kind of go like, how did you do that? But the truth is they have zero marketability. They're absolutely useless inventions. I don't know how many millions of followers that he has, but every single week that he introduces a new one, you go like, okay, I've got to go and see this. And there are people who do things like domino forms. So all they do, they try to create the largest possible domino spreads they can. And then it's amazing. They'll have, 500,000 dominoes. And then there's an event where they're going to knock over the first one and watch the whole thing do its thing. So there are a lot of people that are highly analytical that are doing these kinds of things that have become interesting to social media, but I don't know that they wanted to go out there and build a social media challenge. And this will tell how much of a nerd I am. How many of you remember television series called Robot Wars? So Robot Wars were just a bunch of engineering nerds that would create a robot, and you would put this robot into a fight ring, and the whole goal was for one of the robots to totally immobilize the other one. And it was very scientific, and it was quite clever, and at times brutal. So it became very watchable. So I do think that the analytical people don't mind having what they're doing turned into something analytical, but or something for social media. But there's definitely, it appeals to them as well. Okay, yes.
Do you think poker, like online or poker, gambling, those cards and stuff, what seems like that would be really analytical?
Yeah, that to me fits between the driver and the analytical. So an analytical driver or a driven analytical. If you're going to step into a casino, you want to add that social element. Now I think it's more of an upgrade sort of a behavior. About this downgrid possibility. Online poker. In fact, I don't know anything about the world of competitive poker, but didn't the online poker world competitions evolve into things that would actually go to casinos and have them as live events? So I'm pretty sure that started as an online thing and kind of grew from there. Yeah. Okay, so that's a very long answer to the question you posed, Chris. So hopefully you got what you were looking for out of there. So dopamine,
Thank you.
yeah, dopamine is very much about rewarding someone, and a little bit of dopamine. You see, I don't want you guys to think that dopamine is only about addiction. If Brian were on the call, he'd be saying to you, no, 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 no. Dopamine is just something that moves us into action because one way or another, there is a reward that we're going to receive or enjoy as a result of doing that behavior. So even if I go slightly outgrid or upgrid, whatever direction, if you look at this diagram, there is an increasing amount of dopamine that's coming into play. And that's what's pulling me to have those experiences, to go and make those changes that only occur outgrid, or deal with those issues that are upgrid, or have that that creative sort of pursuit that's going to be downgrid and maybe a little bit ingrid. Care about others. There's a reward that's waiting for you. So amiables want to be loved. To feel loved is a reward. I'm sure it's connected to dopamine. To feel like you've conquered something could be outgrid. I said conquered, but maybe it's to be thrilled by something is upgrid. To conquer it is more outgrid. To understand something is downgrid. There's still a reward, and I'm not out here in these danger zones where addiction reigns. So I want you to kind of appreciate that dopamine is just encouraging you to do something because it says you got a reward waiting for you. We also talked about the complement to serotonin, or it's, yeah, I'd say it's complement, it's opposite, is serotonin. So the Terran is always saying, when you're that far outgrid, a toll is being taken. So energy is being consumed. your self-care is probably suffering. And so you might end up feeling overly, whatever those negative emotions are that we can find in these danger zones. So let's come back to a place of balance. Let's not get so lost in the pursuit of dopamine that we lose ourself. And certainly when we talk about how people deal with addictions, a great deal of the addiction methodologies or dealing with addiction methodologies will about having that person find that greater power, however they define it, and get into communication with that greater power, whether they view it as being inside of themselves or external. It's all this idea about find a way to calm the mind, find a way to calm the spirit, calm the energy, find this place of balance. And so while dopamine is saying, let's get out there and do something, let's get out there and make something happen, serotonin is saying, that's fine. I am here, come back to me to find that recharged battery, etc. So if I said the cure for addiction is to find your personal PowerPoint experiences. Because how many of you recognize, oh, by the way, I do have to say this though, if we're not careful, those processes we do in the middle to get us to the center could also become an addiction, but we would never label it as such. So is that just a statement of value judgment? So you go, yeah, go ahead, unmute, chime something in on that one. So can meditation become addictive? Can escaping become addictive?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but I would wonder, is the addiction being there, or is the addiction to the method of getting there? Because I think that when I'm at the center of the change grid, I'm not meditating anymore. I've reached the goal of the meditation. Or when I'm doing yoga, I'm not doing yoga at the center. I am yoga at the center. So there's the difference between the pursuit of becoming something and being it. So I've just always been curious about, just because a behavior is deemed to be positive in the big scheme of things, doesn't mean it doesn't have a dark side. So for example, we could say that for many people, prayer is a way of moving themselves to the center of the change grid, but there are plenty of people who are addicted to religion. So,
You know, T, I think the whole thing is dependency. I'm thinking I worked a lot with eating disorders, and I had bulimics that were exercising 4 or 5 hours a day. That's not healthy.
Right.
And so I think, you know, addiction is when we lose our sense of freedom of choice. And we are driven by the habit, not by our choice, our conscious choice.
I'm glad that you said that, because that then makes me wonder, the people who are addicted to yoga, they're not in the center of the change grid. They might think they are, and they might but where are they? So that seems to be more of a, if I'm going to go and do something all day, every day, that's either a very up-grid experience or a very out-grid experience. Maybe it, you know, I think it's interesting to think of that as just going through the motions can put me someplace else on the change grid, where achieving the outcome of whatever that process is should put me at the center. And at the center, my reward is peace. My reward is that at least moment of being in the world but not of it, that detachment that allows us to restore. Yeah.
You know, and everything you talk about control, it's being out of control, and it's giving a sense of being in control.
Right.
Like
yeah, so it might be moving me, again, because we're not talking about the profoundly addictive kinds of things. We must look at both of these at once.
And the other thing, T, is, you know, when you were saying that a lot of people that smoke pot are downgrid, so many of my patients are self-medicating with pot for anxiety and not taking anti-anxiety drugs. So I am finding a lot of upgrid people taking pot as self-medication.
And to me, what you're looking at is really the danger zones coming into close contact with one another. Because if you were way up in stress on the regular change grid and it was only 2-dimensional, and you were smoking pot in order to move yourself down grid, that would mean that a certain level of pot, you are no longer in stress. Now you're in power stress, and then you're in power apathy. So are you actually moving through these all the way down into apathy? Or are you moving yourself to the power point? And I think this is an important thing when we're talking about certain drugs in certain doses could move me into power. But if those people aren't careful, they're going to end up smoking more than the dosage. So are they viewing it as medical marijuana? Are they actually using it in a prescribed manner? Or are they just waking and baking and being stoners all day, every day? So,
that's a good point. I think it's all that continuum and degree. You know what? And there was a question last week, and I want to make sure, I have to ask you this. When somebody can lift a car, you know, the situation of the woman lifting the car to save the baby's head. What's happening there? Where
I'll show you.
They?
Yeah,
okay.
this was one of the examples we came up with. It's right there. Endorphins live in the outgrid quadrant, more in high challenge situations. So here you would have a combination of endorphin and dopamine coming into play at the same time. And those endorphins are where those super strengths come from, etc. So you could also have that in the upgrid danger zone, but we were saying, like, are endorphins more about fight or flight? And the thought is that while there be endorphins present, also more upgrade, and you see there's some shading here for that. We had a debate about how far up does that extend. But most definitely, the endorphin rush that people experience tends to be more of an expressive driver, upgrid, outgrid kind of a trigger point. For that. That's what we came up with last time. We could be completely wrong, but nevertheless, that's where the conversation took us last time around.
You know what? I got one more point. You know what? When you were talking before about, you know, the cocaine and magnifying, I think you're right. It's not escaping, it's magnifying. But you know what else I've discovered? That it can be replacing. Let me give you an example. Let's say somebody had athletic prowess, and now they're older and lazier, and they're not on the football field. I find them replacing the natural high they once had with the cocaine. Do you know what I mean? So it may not just magnify, but it may replace the natural addiction, which was healthy, basically, that they once had.
Well, right. And so I think what you've just described there is that you know, again, dopamine wants more dopamine. And so the people in this outgrid danger zone at a certain time in life, but now lost that, may just want to return to that because they remembered how good they felt when they were all powerful, you know, making life happen, you know, being the mover and shaker or whatever. So even though their circumstances have remained unchanged, returning to those behaviors associated with that time period could very well create an escape for them. And I think that's, but whether they're not escaping from these things, they're escaping from the absence of these things. And that's why I think it's different than the other danger zones, because these are things people actually are trying to escape from. And if anything, these are things that the opposite of these are what people are trying to escape from. Yeah. So, and by the way, there's plenty of example of that in the news. So just turn on the TV. Okay, well, our time's up for today. So this was not the subject I had planned on covering. So I'm going to send you guys an email about what we're going to be talking about on Thursday, so you can get your thoughts there. But I'll put this one up just as Circle of Brilliance talking about addiction. Okay, so thanks everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye, T. Thanks.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.